Hello, my name is Sarah. I am a writer, content strategist, and learning designer, and I don't think there's that much really specifically to dig into there, but I will say that I come here partially to share a Jewish perspective about Christmas, and this is what I've come up with. I hope it's acceptable, and I'm here afterward if you want to talk about it. So this is what I have to say. I'm going to take this occasion to tell you what I find remarkable and unremarkable about Jesus as a Jew. If you are a Christian and offended, I agree to listen after and try to understand as deeply as I can. But remember, and honestly I think this a lot in my head when I enter Christian spaces in particular, like this one, I want to say this sometimes to believing and semi-believing and even non-believing Christians. I want to say, remember, I live in your world and not the other way around. I have sung in Christian choirs and listened to Christian sermons and sworn in on Christian Bibles and been graduated from every institution I have ever attended with Christian prayer. Your religion is inscribed in the laws of the state. Your days off are not my days off, but I have lived by your days off in every job I have ever had. I say this all both seriously and lightly. This is the gentle humor with which I and other Jews, especially in America, speak of going to eat Chinese food on Christmas Eve. This is also the nod between the worker at the Chinese or Indian restaurant and the Jew eating the Chinese food. It is not just my life, but my mind that has been adapted to fit the Christian world. Just to get around in this Christian/post-Christian world, I have read many books about Christianity, and I have even come to understand some of the religion's theological details, although of course not all. The reverse, sadly, is rarely true. I understand, for example, that it is really Easter that should be the most holy and celebrated day, but I forgive the focus on Christmas because winter is miserable, especially in Europe, and pine trees and extra lights and sugar at the darkest time of year are nice for everyone, and I will never turn down an excuse for marzipan. Despite my interest in their religion, however, even the nicest Christians I know tend to, by necessity, see my religion as the proto-undeveloped version of theirs. This is historical, institutional, unavoidable, maybe. When I sang in the King's College Chapel in Cambridge, the windows of the building were designed to show that the most sacred texts of my religion were merely a predecessor for the true, developed view of the Christian faith. One has to always be a little suspicious of developmental narratives. They do a lot of work. This cannot help but sting deeply and bitterly to me, and it also, simultaneously, seems preposterous at the same time. Meanwhile, Judaism, of course, has been carrying on over the last 2,000 years, complexifying and deepening like the living, breathing, surviving, thinking, moving human civilization that it is. To imagine Judaism as merely a predecessor is not just hurtful, but it is to neglect the insights, available even to those of other faiths, of the Talmudic hypertextual discussion across time about the nature of the good life and the reverence and awe owed to the world. In recent years, we have collectively, some of us, wrung our hands about decolonizing statues and syllabi, and I wonder what it would mean to decolonize this, the Christian faith itself, so that it might sit with greater humility, a Christian virtue, in its place among the family of man. So this is the first, most bitter part of what I have to say. And try to see it my way. In my religion, we think forgiveness is nice, but we think that justice is the greater virtue. Now I'll get on to my second point. Jews think that Jesus' birth, what we're celebrating now at Christmas, is the least remarkable thing about him. But again, marzipan is wonderful, so here we are. Jews think that Jesus' birth is unremarkable, but I will describe two things that I find remarkable about Jesus, and one thing that I do not, but wish that more Christians did. Here's thing one. Jesus is not a fan of money in a very profound way. Jesus is remarkable to me because his gospel is generally too radical for his followers. Very few Christians I meet are actually interested in giving up their earthly possessions to serve the poor, although I'm always delighted to meet one who is. But Jesus says, if you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Jesus repeatedly tells his followers that money will not save them, that it will in fact imperil their souls. It has always been rather facile, frankly, and I say this as a profoundly left-wing person, rather facile and ahistorical to suggest that Jesus is straightforwardly a socialist. But Jesus rejects, more or less entirely, even the wise getting and spending of money as a central aspect of virtue. This is remarkable, given its contrast with, for example, what Aristotle termed the executive virtue of knowing how to make and give money, and what Jews emphasize in household ethics, and of course what our current society values today. I will show you what I see here as a Jew, which is that I see Jesus as a virtuous Jew in ancient Palestine, and that means that I understand him to be a member of a householder religion, one of my favorite new sociological terms. Judaism was then, and it is yet still, from a sociological perspective, a householder religion, which means we tend to base our idea of the good life on the premise that you should keep a household, including at least some material goods, more might be better, that basically you should marry and have children if you can, and that the good life and the ethical life is played out in these grounded familial responsibilities. But Jesus diverges from this, and I think that is profound. And it is profound in part because of another thing about Jesus' beliefs which diverges from householder religions, and this is my second remarkable Jesus point. Jesus suggests a transcendence or even an abolition of the family. Jesus repeatedly reminds us that in heaven there is no marriage. He tells his followers that they should be prepared to even hate and forsake their biological families to follow him, and he asserts that it is those in his circle of followers who are his true mother and brothers. It is from statements like these that Paul derives the assertion that we are all related through Christ as much as through blood, that the most important union for humans to be concerned with is that of the body of Christ as a whole. While it would be cheeky to suggest that Jesus is a socialist, it is not entirely preposterous to suggest that Jesus himself, and even many of the Christians who followed him, are somewhat interested in that most radical and least loved idea in left-wing political theory, the abolition of the family. Lest Christians, or anyone in the audience, be appalled by the mere phrase abolishing the family, let me remind them that the term abolish, when used in political theory and in the Hegelian sense, means to transcend something by making it no longer necessary, while at the same time incorporating what is good about the previous form into the new era. The famous Hegelian word is Aufhebung. Again, for those curious, offended, or both, I am happy to speak about this more afterward. But let me be clear, when I speak of this being remarkable for Jesus, I say this with admiration. I think this is an improvement, not unconditionally, but in many ways, on our ethos of householder religions. I even dare to say I think it is the way of the future, both the movement away from money and the abolition, the transcendence of the family unit. I admire this, and I hope that one day we will accomplish this together across many different faiths. The powerful kernel of the story of a bastard child born in a barn, soon to be on the run from the cops with an adoptive father, is, at least in part, that Jesus' expression and conception of what family is, or could be, is so much wider than our conventional idea that it actually transcends the concept of the family itself. There is, in essence, something bigger and better to build together. Finally, here's an unremarkable thing about Jesus. There is one thing that is not remarkable to me as a Jew about Jesus' life and thought, which is that Jesus is mostly concerned with what you do, at least in his teachings that we have written down, and not so much what you believe. I follow a small group of radical Mennonites on Facebook. They are called the Marginal Mennonite Society, and they're great, and you should follow them, no matter what you believe. And recently they posted this quote, which I think puts things rather nicely. Here it is. It says, "Consider this remarkable fact. In the Sermon on the Mount, there is not a single word about what to believe, only words about what to do and how to be. But by the time the Nicene Creed is written, only 3 centuries later, there is not a single word in it about what to do and how to be, only words about what to believe." This is by someone called Robin R. Mayers. I am aware, of course, that Jesus does talk about faith and belief and heaven, although it depends on the Greek translation what faith means. Faith and heaven are in contrast things that the Jews that I grew up with rarely spoke of or even believed in the case of heaven. But Jesus' emphasis on action is simultaneously remarkable for its difference to the way institutions have since focused their energy and the persecution of others for their beliefs. It is simultaneously unremarkable to me, in that action remains the focus of Judaism 2,000 years later. For Jews, at least as I have experienced Judaism, morality is, in general, its own reward,
at most further rewarded by the experience of the divine in that moral act. That Jesus expresses an emphasis on doing is unremarkable to me, but perhaps it should be more remarked on generally in a world where too little good is actively done by believers and non-believers alike. And there you have it in very brief form. This is what these particular starry nights look like to me. Thank you for listening to my curious, potentially offensive thoughts. Let us have a very Merry Christmas and go do the sorts of radical and remarkable things of which Jesus would approve. Thank you.